So hi, everybody in the audience. I am Abby, the Executive Director of the Vermont Ski and Snowboard Museum. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for our first virtual Red Bench of the season. Many of you in the audience and those who are going to be watching this later are well aware that we're a nonprofit, and I know I sound repetitive as I continually remind you, but it's your generosity and continued support that allows us to keep going. This year was my 5-year anniversary as executive director here at the museum. And my time here included the threat of a pandemic, keeping the organization going through it, and then successfully coming out on the other side. And we are still here because of you, our members, and our supporters. And as funding remains a challenge, I ask you all to remember how important cultural organizations are and include us when making your charitable gifts this year and in the future. If you're not yet a member, please consider becoming one. We're also currently running our annual year-end campaign, and it is the year-end fundraising that ensures our year-round success. And you can also directly support the Red Bench series by making a Red Bench donation. As an incentive, anyone that makes a Red Bench or annual campaign donation of at least $10 will be entered into a raffle to win a pair of Darn Tough ski socks. Each $10 increment is an additional entry. And if you've already donated or you have a Red Bench Seasons Pass, you are already entered. I will draw those winners tomorrow afternoon. And helping make this series possible are our generous Red Bench series sponsors. Silver sponsors Scholler Textile and RK Miles. Bronze sponsors Sisler Builders, and our media sponsor Vermont Ski and Ride. A massive thank you for their support. All right, so tonight we'll be exploring the artwork of Vermont artist Churchill Ettinger, who is widely known for his ski art. Joining us from Washington State is Curt Simonson. Curt is a 20th century American ski art collector and a longtime researcher of Ettinger's ski art. And joining us from Weston, Vermont, I believe you're in Weston right now, Tom, is Churchill's son, Tom Ettinger. Tom is a passionate skier just like his father and can often be found skiing Stratton. He also manages his father's estate. How Curt and Tom connected is a bit serendipitous, evolving into a friendship and a project to catalog Ettinger's ski art. Over the past 2 years, they've cataloged over 150 examples of his work. Tonight, they'll share stories of Churchill's life and career and show examples of that work. You will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end, so please type those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I want to thank you, Curt and Tom, for putting together this presentation and taking the time to join us tonight. And I am now officially handing this over to you.
Thank you, Abby. Tom and I are honored to be here tonight on the virtual Red Bench. Following a short introduction, I will provide a catalog project overview, and at that time, I will turn it over to Tom to talk about Church's education, his resume, and 40 years of fabulous ski art. And then, as Abby mentioned, we will finish up with a Q&A session. We'd like to start by thanking the Voorhees family and everyone who submitted paintings to the catalog to date. We'd also like to thank Abby and the Vermont Ski and Snowboard Museum for seeing the relevance and value of tonight's topic. A quick note on scope. This presentation contains representative examples of Church's ski art. It is in no way comprehensive. One important consideration for tonight was the quality of available photographs. So there are many works in the catalog that you will not see in tonight's presentation. Now, regarding the project, one of the most common questions I get is, why are you doing it? And for me, the answer to that question goes back 18 years. In February of 2006, I was at the Tacoma Antique Show, and I came across the painting you see now on your screen. From a distance, I could see it was a nice winter landscape, so I made a beeline for it. And as I got close, I saw 3 powder skiers just ripping it up. And at that point, I felt like I was drawn into the painting. I mean, I could feel the motion of the skiers, and I could almost hear their hoots and hollers echoing off the mountain on the other side of the valley. And I thought, wow, who painted this thing? So I looked down at the signature and I saw Churchill Ettinger. And I didn't know who that was, but I thought, wow, I got to find out more about this fellow. And that's what Tom and I partially intend to do tonight, is to introduce you to him and his ski art. But before we do that, a quick update on the catalog. We started this project in September of 2022 with the purpose of increasing the awareness of and the appreciation for Church's extensive body of ski art. To date, we've found and cataloged 152 oils, watercolors, etchings, and lithographs. And those paintings represent 19 different ski areas in North America and Europe. So now we've gotten to the point here in year 3 where we've entered the public outreach phase of the project. And so we're calling for paintings. What we mean by that is if you have an oil or a watercolor of a ski piece of art by Churchill Ettinger, we would love to hear from you. And the way to do that is to contact us through this email address at ettingerskiart@gmail.com. We'll repeat that at the end and provide some additional contact as well, but wanted to get that out there right now. We are asking the public for support in expanding the catalog. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Tom, take it away.
All right, let's talk about Dad's background because he had an interesting beginning. As his father, who was a great educator, my grandfather Ettinger, said, "You're going to go to Columbia and you're going to study law." Well, that lasted about 1 year. And he quit and shipped out to sea and went around the world on a tramp steamer. And rumored that he supported himself aboard and laughter as being one of the better craps players in New York City. Anyway, he studied at the National Academy for a year, basically drawing, and then Art Students League for illustration and painting, and then the New York Evening School of Industrial Arts, illustration and life drawing. He always loved life drawing. He started his career actually as a portrait artist for the New York Sunday World and Outlook magazine. And this lasted about 10 years. And we have about 80 different drawings. Up here, you see Clarence Darrow and Jean Tunney and Edna St. Vincent Millay. He was also doing illustrations for magazines and for whiskey makers. And he's also started to teach, and he taught life drawing at the New York Evening School. And but basically, he was a freelance artist, struggling because the Depression was upon him. During that time, he continued to do the illustrations. And here is a cover for Outdoor Magazine. And then down below is an illustration for I don't know what. But he got a big break about 1949 or 50 when he was hired to be the art director for Standard magazines, a huge operation that were basically in the business of publishing pulp magazines. And two of them are here. And he didn't do the art. He was the art director, but most of the guys that painted these paintings were good friends and became good friends of the family. Big break for my father in the 30s, late 30s, was being selected to be an etcher for the Associated American Artists. This is during the Depression, and artists were really hurting. And if you if you could be selected by Associate American Artists, it was a good deal. They got $200 a plate and no royalty, but guys like Grant Wood and Thomas Hart Benton, Gordon Grant, Vermont's own Luigi Lucioni, they all really practically existed on the money that they made from Associated American Artists. And Dad etched for them from the mid-30s to about 1952. The first, actually, one of the first times we see Dad getting excited about skiing was in 39 when he did this particular etching, which is wonderful because I don't think Dad had done much skiing at all, and he was winging it when he drew these skiers. And again, this is a dry point etching. All of my father's etchings were dry point, i.e., engravings on copper, which are then printed. Also, we see some watercolors emerge. Here, the skiers and an etching almost identical. So we know he was skiing the Catskills. I don't remember this. I was a little kid, and but both of these were at Bel Air a couple of years ago. I tried to track down where, and I learned that this is the old Bel Air is a lost ski area, and this little trail is no longer. And he started to play around in watercolor too, and his technique is just beginning to develop. Pretty simple. Again, we're not exactly sure when these were done, other than probably late 30s, 40s. There's one of the Alps here, which I know was not done later when his technique was much more refined. Okay, here we go. We're moving to Vermont. Dad left Standard Magazines in 1950, and he really he had eyeballed Vermont. One of his good friends had moved to a little farm in Weston, Vermont, and he was intrigued by that. But what really turned him on was going to Stowe in, I think, 3 different times. And yes, we stayed at Ranch Camp. And Ranch Camp was an operating lumber camp operated by the Burt family in a little valley just off of Mansfield. And in the summer, the lumber crews would come in and stay there. In the winter, skiers would arrive. And Dad went up once, loved it, said, "Tommy, you're coming with me." And so I think it was in 1950. He took me up there, a sleeper train. And the neat thing about Ranch Camp in those days was it was only accessible by dog sled or by cross-country skiing in, or they had an Army surplus weasel. And I experienced the dog sled. I did not experience the weasel, but I did also experience walking all the way in. Anyway, it was a great trip, and the story I like to tell about it is the first day there. Dad said, "We're going to hike up the Bruce Trail, Tommy," and the Bruce Trail had been cut by the CCC from top of Mansfield down into this little valley. And so I put on skins for the first time, and my dad did too. And we hiked up this. I can't believe I made it, but I did. And Dad had befriended the year before a couple of the people that he then introduced to me, George Wesson, who was the head of the ski patrol, and Bob Borden, a very young instructor at the time, later head of the Stowe Ski School. And it it really sunk the hook in to Dad for moving to Vermont. And after a search of about a year, parents ended up buying the little farm that belonged to his old art buddy, Tom Fitzsimmons, and we moved lock, stock, and barrel. And with pretty much zero income other than the trailing off of the Associate American artist, and he was going to be a fine artist, and he started to paint. And this particular watercolor is on the up above our old farm, which is land now part of the Weston Priory. And I moved up there and immediately decided I was going to be an incredible ski racer. I'm a little ahead of myself here, but Dad, when he moved up, he opened up the top loft of the barn that adjoined the old farmhouse into his studio, and he painted and sold out of the studio for 25, 30 years. And he also sold through Abercrombie and Fitch, the Adirondack Store, Crossroads of Sport, but primarily out of a studio. And it was my mother had a decorating business, and she'd sold some of her wares down in the woodshed. And if somebody expressed interest in art, she'd point them up the stairs to Dad, and he could charm anybody. Fortunately, for my education, as the Associated American Artist gig ground to a halt in the early 50s, he was picked up by Brown and Bigelow and put under contract, I think in 1956 or 57, and that lasted through the early 70s. And he would do 6 to 12 etchings of wildlife every year. And this was sort of his bread and butter. And then the rest of the time, he was painting. And his 3 areas, actually there are 4 areas: upland hunting, fishing, skiing, and then he was a wonderful portrait artist. He is there. It's a self-portrait of him looking at us. And interestingly, the black and white in the center at the bottom, that is an etching portrait that he did, a dry point etching. Interestingly, Dad was on file with the U.S. Mint because he was one of about 10 or 15 people in the United States that could probably counterfeit a bill if he wanted to. Yes, and this is one of my favorites, belongs to the museum, and it's of Annie Mead Lawrence. And at that time, she was Annie Mead, and her parents owned Pico, and they had this portrait painted of her, and Dad was totally charmed. Both my father and I, the first year we moved up here, started skiing, and it was at Bromley. Bromley was the area. Okemo had been developed. Stratton didn't exist. And so we did all our skiing there. And interesting, the skier on the right, the sweep, that was it's a picture of my sister, who had been studying at Rhode Island School of Design, took a gap year before going to graduate school, fell in love with a fellow patroller, and moved to Aspen, Colorado. But this particular painting of her was her favorite, and it's a lovely painting. Um, I was I was convinced I was going to be the world's greatest ski racer, and at that time, Otmar Schneider had just won the Olympic slalom, and there's a famous picture of him with his reverse shoulder technique. And basically, this is the picture that Dad painted, putting my face in, and then he gave this to me as a Christmas present. And that's the old reverse shoulder, get through the slalom poles, which were not floppy poles like they have now. And that same technique shows up in a couple of etchings. And you gotta avoid that pole, drop that inside shoulder, and nice loose ski pants, all the things that we no longer see. Interesting on the right, this was an etching that he did just for his own edification. I doubt whether four or five prints were pulled from it. And it was done at Snow Valley. Snow Valley is sort of a neighbor to Bromley and Stratton. It is no longer, it's a lost Vermont ski area. But at the time, it was a wonderful spring area. It faces due north. And when Bromley would get weathered out in the springtime, when just melt away, we would move over to Snow Valley, and he did this etching of that main. It basically is one large open slope. And he was painting different things. And we took a trip. I think it was in 56 or 7, I'm not sure, to Tuckerman's Ravine. And he painted the oil on the right, which still is one of my very favorite paintings. And when he did it, it hung in a place of honor in his studio. And every time I walked in that studio, I would say, "Dad, don't sell that painting." And he said, "Okay, I won't sell it. I won't sell it." And one time I came up from New York and the painting was gone. And Dad was, "Oh, Lord, I'm sorry, Tommy." And anyway, so he must have done this other one. We didn't know that this watercolor existed, which is almost exact replica of the oil. And we didn't know this until we started to research for this catalog. And we don't have a clue who owns it. We just have a photograph of it. So we know it was done, and but not when, but likely well after 59, since I know it was on the wall of his studio for at least 6 years. Stratton Mountain. Dad became a fixture at Stratton. He loved the mountain. He loved the people there. And this particular watercolor is interesting because it was done in 63. And there in the background, you see Stratton that had just opened. And he hadn't made the transition to Stratton quite yet. He still was skiing his beloved runs at Bromley as well. However, when he went to Stratton, it was all in. And here is a picture of Dad skiing the old North American. And skiing at that time I was a rep for Head Skis. And of course, he's on his Headmasters with his head poles. And if you look in the background, you'll see Bromley. And Bromley appears in many, many, many of Dad's paintings. He couldn't quite give it up. And so there'd be a painting, and in the distance would be Bromley. Again, on the left, there's Bromley. And that would be looking northwest from the face of Stratton, which is sort of northeast, a little more east than north. However, then the sketch to the right, that view is almost due north, a little bit northeast, right up the valley. And if you go to the end of those fields that you see in the far distance, that would be where the Ettinger farmstead was. March Day, Stratton. You just saw a sketch, and that sketch was for this painting, which is one of my favorites. And this was reproduced, and it's interesting because, again, in doing some research for this evening, I'm talking to a old friend in Sun Valley, and I said, Chip, I said, do you have any Ettingers on the wall? And he said, yeah, I got one. I said, send me a picture. So I sent me a picture, and we're pretty damn sure that this is the original, and which just tickles the hell out of me that we found it. Corn snow on Stratton. This is an oil, but it's interesting. And Dad was fascinated and loved the transition going from the base of Stratton, which was all hardwoods, to the top of Stratton, which was basically spruce. And he loved to paint the combination, and he was delighted in painting the spruce trees laden with snow, some with a little bit, some with a lot. And here are four paintings. And one of the reasons we have them here is to show you how sort of varying the quality of what we have to reproduce from. On the Wanderer down below is pretty good. On spruce is pretty bad. Stratton Pond, very weak. The small painting on the, actually it's not a small painting, that happens to be a 3x5 card of a larger painting, which is beautiful. And this card was used by the Stratton Corporation as a Christmas card back when. Stowe. Well, Dad, go to the next one, please, Curt. Just remind me. I want to. Okay, go. We're going to go back to Stowe. Dad, after his early ventures to Stowe and after our move to Vermont, he didn't go north. He didn't go to Sugarbush or Mad River. He went a couple of times to Stowe, and it was probably in the early 60s that he painted the nosedive, and this was just after they put the gondola in on the other face of the valley. On the right-hand side, again, the nosedive, and you'll see just the little bit of Spruce Peak, which is now way, way, way bigger. But he did. We know there are other pictures of Stowe out there. We just don't know where they are and who has them, and we'd love to see them. Crystal Mountain, Washington. My sister and brother-in-law, after living in Aspen for 4 years, pulled up stakes, and they moved to Bellevue, Washington, where Skip Voorhees started a small ski area called Hyack. And the fact that my sister's family and eventually 3 boys were out there drew my mom and dad out to the Pacific Northwest at least once a year. And so we have a large body of Dad's work in the Pacific Northwest and then throughout the West. And we'll be walking through those paintings in the next few minutes. This is a large watercolor, a lot of crystal, and from various angles. He loved the terrain. He loved the mountains. Loved the spruces and the snowfields. This particular watercolor was reproduced and is available as a print, and a very well done print. And Dad signed, I believe, 350 copies. Here's Rainier from Crystal, oil on canvas panel. He loved the clouds hanging below the peaks, and you'll see him fiddling with skiers' techniques too. You're the little bit more modern than some of his earlier stuff. More Pacific Northwest. Again, some weak reproductions that we hope to improve upon. Often, Dad, upon leaving, when they break camp from Bellevue, staying with Susie and Skip and the grandkids, my mother would flee to Mexico for the rest of the winter, and my father would ski other areas. And he skied both squaws, the original squaw, and Alpine Meadows. And one fun story about Alpine Meadows is that at a Brown and Bigelow sales conference, he met Charles Schultz of Peanut fame, and they became buddies. And Schultz said, "Schultz, you got to come out and ski." So Dad went down, and a lot of people think of Schultz's sport as being hockey. He was a hockey fanatic and built an arena near his home, but he also liked to ski. And Dad had a wonderful time skiing with Schultz at Alpine's Meadow. He also skied snowmass and loved it. But his relationship with snowmass began way earlier, when Susie and Skip were living in Aspen, and Dad became friends with a very good friend of Susie and Skip's, a guy named Shorty Pabst. And Shorty Pabst had a large ranch, which subsequently became part of the snowmass ski area. So if you go through Dad's etchings, you'll find a whole bunch of Western subjects, elk, mule deer, bighorn sheep, and the background for a lot of those was the Snowmass Ranch. And then when it became an area, opened up to the public, Dad was anxious to get back, and he loved it. And he refused to go back to Aspen ever again. This is interesting because Dad painted this watercolor on the left, and as he did on occasion, he did a stone lithograph titled Colorado Powder. And this is fun because it was one of two that he did. And Curt, if you show the next one, you'll see New Snow, which is a Stratton Mountain. Those two stone lithographs are the only lithographs he did of skiing, and often are sold as a pair. And they're just wonderful, wonderful lithographs. Here we're back in the Cascades. That hung in my studio for a long, long time until somebody wrenched it away from me. And this is interesting because I consider this typical of the dilemma of this catalog. We're not quite sure where this is. It could be in the Rockies. It could be in the Sierras. It could be in the Cascades. We don't know. We'd love to know that. And if we might be able to also then find out when it was painted. But this is typical of some of our little conundrums. Snowbird. Dad skied both Alta and Snowbird more than a few times. Of course, Snowbird opened well after Alta, and I take I'll take a little bit of credit for this venture because I was fortunate enough to ski Snowbird the year it opened, and on a Sports Illustrated gig, and came back and I said, "Dad, you got to go ski Snowbird. You got to go see Snowbird." And so he skied Snowbird, and this is one of a few that he did of that mountain. That's just a great bit of terrain. Sun Valley, back in the early 70s, good friend of mine, Chip Fisher, who was living in Sun Valley at the time and was a friend of Dad's, said, "Church, we got to do a show for you." So Dad spent, I think, did 2 visits there, did a bunch of Sun Valley paintings, and then he had the only one-man show that he ever had west of the Mississippi, and that was courtesy of Chip Fisher and the Snug Company back then. Dad made 2 trips to Europe. We're not quite sure the dates, but he went with a group of buddies from Stratton to Davos on the first trip, and we're not quite sure of the destinations where he stayed on the second. But he did a bunch of paintings, which I'll show you here. Powder Diavolezzo. That was done after the early trip. This is one of my favorite paintings. It's a colossal painting. It's 36 by 56, oil on canvas. And that is a big, big painting. And I never knew it existed until Curt clued me in on it as he started to work on this catalog. And this had to have been a commissioned piece. And my guess is that on his second trip, I know he was hosted by good friends, and they went on and commissioned this oil. Hopefully, we'll be able to confirm that in months to come. But it's a big, beautiful painting. Now we're back at Stratton on Tamarack, and damn Stratton for taking Tamarack away from us. It's now merged with something else, and the old Tamarack Trail no longer exists. My father is just it's killing him. But again, the snow on the spruce trees, and here we're looking again almost due north, and our family farm would have been off in the distance there, 20 miles or so. This is another Stratton one. I love this because this is classic snow on spruce, hardwoods, skier in the foreground. And that was Dad's favorite place. Most likely, he skied the Spruce. We may have some pictures coming up of the Spruce Trail, but that was Dad's place. And he would be very happy in that the Spruce Trail still exists as it did back in his day. One of the very few Stratton runs that hasn't been screwed with. Prince. Curt, why don't you talk about Prince? I'll let you, because you have a few.
All right, will do. Thanks, Tom. So we wanted to dive in a little bit to the prints that Tom has talked about throughout the presentation. There were a total of 4 that we know of. It's possible there were more, but we have identified 4. These 2 were published in the mid-60s by Vermont magazines, and they were published at the same time. And interestingly enough, the one on the left is March Day Stratton, and the one on the right is Crystal Mountain. We've also seen that one titled Traverse the Lucky Shot, but it's exactly the same scene, part of the same limited edition. A couple of things to notice about prints, and this is important from a cataloging perspective when we're trying to determine if a particular piece of art is an original watercolor or oil painting, or if it's a reproduction. Here are the things that you can look for. The first and most obvious one is usually at the bottom of a print, especially if it's a limited edition, there will be in pencil the title of the piece, the edition. For example, on the left, you see March Day Stratton Mountain edition 350, ED means edition, and then the artist's signature on the opposite side. And another thing that you can look for, you can't see it in these images, but there's typically a white border around the image area on a print. There are some exceptions, though. Because of the way Church taped his watercolors when he was painting them, it is possible to find a watercolor, an original watercolor that is framed with a white border. Not common, but possible. So those are some of the things that you look for to differentiate an original watercolor from a print. And I should also say, Tom pointed this out to me earlier today, this is high quality offset lithography. These reproductions are lovely. They display really well, and they're just beautiful to look at. The other 2, the one on the left is titled The Choice. That was done by the New York Graphic Society. And the interesting thing about this print is the way the New York Graphic Society printed it. It was printed with a white border, and then this label that you see was actually printed at the bottom of the image. I have most often seen this print framed, matted and framed, with the white border trimmed off and this label trimmed off, and sometimes, but not always, the label will be affixed to the back side of the frame. So this is the trickiest one of all of them. We do not know where this original watercolor is for sure. And it's the trickiest one of the 4 to identify. As a matter of fact, we don't know where the originals of any of these 4 watercolors are, except for maybe the one that Tom recently found. Now, the one on the right is another Crystal Mountain painting. It's entitled Cloud Cap on Mount Rainier. You'll see it's printed a little bit differently. This was done by the Sportsman's Eyrie in 1969 as a printer, and it was done in a limited edition of 300, and each of the 300 were individually numbered. But like all the other ones, you can pick it out because it's got the title, the edition number at the bottom with the artist's signature there. Tom, any other thoughts on the prints?
No, I seem to remember a second New York Graphic Society print, but we haven't been able to find one or figure out whether actually there was one.
But these, I should also say, these these two prints are also lovely. They display incredibly well, and they're just beautiful prints. And we would love to find the originals of them as well for the catalog. So I'm going to do another call for paintings here. Again, we need your help in finding additional oil paintings and watercolors. Again, if you have one, you think you know somebody who might have one, or you have a vague notion of somebody who might have one, please contact us at ettingerskiart@gmail.com. I'd also like to point out, if you have questions about prints, etchings, or lithographs, you can contact Tom directly at the tettinger314@gmail.com email address. So at this phase of our project to catalog these paintings, here in year 3, it's really important that we engage all of you and everyone else out there to help us find more paintings. And with that, we'll call Abby back and we'll transition into the Q&A session.
All right, so if anybody in the audience has any questions, right on the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A option. Type those in right now. There aren't any yet. So I will wait a little bit if anybody has questions and needs some time to type them. And while I'm waiting, just a comment, because I find it fascinating that the two of you connected on this project, and people that have read your bio when we were promoting this event, Curt, know that you ski at Crystal Mountain and that's your home mountain. It's fascinating that Churchill has so many paintings of Crystal Mountain.
Yeah, Abby, it's interesting. It's one, before I was introduced to Tom, it was one of sort of the mysteries for me. I'm like, when I started to understand a little bit about Church, and I found out that he lived and worked in Vermont, and he did a lot of paintings, of Stratton and other Vermont scenes, and around the globe. I couldn't figure out like why I was finding, like, in auction records and whatnot, so many paintings of Crystal Mountain. It just didn't make any sense. And uh, a friend of Tom's, Martha Lapham, during my research, put me in contact with Tom, and it was one of the first conversations we had. And I said, Tom, why are there so many paintings of Crystal Mountain? This doesn't seem to make sense. And so then he told me.
Very cool. All right, we've got some questions. The first one, were any of the paintings used as travel posters or advertisements?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Uh, no, no, I don't believe so. Some of the etchings were used. The Brown and Bigelow, all that body of work, they bought reproduction rights. So most all of those etchings that we show, they had reproduction rights, but Dad held edition rights. Very different. And so what we have been selling through the years are direct prints from the etching plate, whereas Brown and Bigelow took a print and reproduced it in all manner of ways. So yes, there were commercial to an extreme with those etchings. But from the skiing side, I don't believe any were used commercially.
Okay. Not totally a question, but a comment. Someone says they have two Churchill paintings. They don't know if they are prints or originals. So I would say, send a photo to you guys, your email addresses, and you guys can start working to figure that out.
ettingerskiart@gmail.com. The sleuths will go to work.
Amazing. All right. Tom, how long was your father able to continue to ski, and how about you? The passion clearly runs throughout your family.
Well, I have my season pass at Stratton for this season. So I will be going into my 80, celebrating my 87th year on the slopes of Stratton. Dad skied. Um, it's sort of a poignant story, but Dad skied 3 or 4 weeks before he passed away, and he had been battling cancer. He thought he had it licked, and we skied over Christmas, and he uh, gradually went downhill, and he loved to watch ski racing. It was just beginning to be a deal on television. And so he took a small portable television and took it up to his bedroom and propped it up. And one of the last things he did, and I remember doing with him, was watching the Sarajevo Olympics.
And what did your father do artistically during World War II?
Uh, he he was too old. He had he had two brothers that had been in the First World War, and one of his older brothers, and then had uh, uh, volunteered for the Second World War. He was too old. He had two kids. It drove him nuts. He tried to enlist in the Navy. He tried to enlist in the Army for Army camouflage, but they wouldn't have him. And that's he lived on grandfather Ettinger's farm in on the Choptank River in Maryland throughout the latter part of the Depression and up until 1941 when we moved full time back to New York and he took the job at Standard Magazines. But certainly having a studio that his father, my grandfather, owned helped him weather the Depression but the bulk of the war years we were living in Sneed's Landing, New York, and he was commuting to his job at Standard Magazines.
All right, I've got two questions that are similar, so I'm going to kind of try to combine them. Um, did he take photos of subjects or paint plain air? And then the next question is, did he work from photos as sketches?
Um, Good question. Most definitely, most of his work was done from photos. He did some plein air. He would take color notes on occasion, paint color notes, but he always had a camera around his neck, and took voluminous rolls and rolls and rolls of film. Um, and uh, but he also got to know places well enough that he could sit down and he could sketch. He could sketch the spruce at Stratton. He did not need a picture of the spruce. He could sketch North American. He knew Bromley. He could sit down and compose a painting that he liked. But a lot of his subject matter did come from photographs of what he thought were interesting subjects.
Okay. Some of the watercolors, for example, Snowbird and the first Crystal Mountain painting, seem to accentuate the texture of the substrate. Did Churchill intentionally select them to elicit specific feelings?
If you're talking about the paper, um, uh, he always liked to paint. And I don't know the term. He liked a lot of finger teeth, uh, uh, bumpy watercolor paper, which he used to advantage. Uh, and he never liked a smooth sheet. Um, I think that's the best way I could answer that.
All right. How many individuals or museums have contributed to the catalog already, and approximately what percentage of the catalog do you think is complete?
Whoa.
Tom,
Curt?
you want me to take a crack at that?
Me?
No, would you like me to? You want me to take a crack at
Uh,
that?
I think there are at least a couple of dozen paintings out there that we don't know about. And we started when Kurt and I first started working together. He came back here, and I had boxes of slides that Dad had taken of paintings, and the quality was awful, but they were, we could identify individual paintings, and we started to put numbers to them, and the more we learned about them, the catalog grew. Well, we know there won't be any more lithographs or etchings. That's a finite. It's so it would only be oils and watercolors. If it would be wonderful, we could find another couple of dozen. I think they're out there. Um, uh, I we've come across a couple of dozen in the last 6 months. Just Kurt is a very good sleuth. He is an incredible researcher, and we've looked at old exhibition catalogs from galleries all over the country. We just have an awful lot of raw information, so we know there's more out there.
Yeah, one interesting part of that is that there are paintings that we know of only from one source. Like Tom said, it could be a dealer catalog or an exhibition catalog from the 60s or the 70s. And it's the only reference we can find to that work. So, and there are, in fact, there are what I would call groups of paintings, say from from a gallery catalog where there were maybe three of Church's works in that particular catalog. We know they exist because the way they were in that catalog, but we've never seen any other evidence of any of those three paintings. So, it's possible that, they're all in the same collection somewhere, or they could be dispersed all over the place. But because there's so many paintings that we know exist, but only exist in one solitary record, that alone makes me believe that there have to be quite a few more out there.
I think there are a whole bunch of small sketches out there. He would often gift those to friends as they came through the studio. He would gift them a small oil or a small watercolor, and we have nothing on those. None, nothing.
Oh, and the first question is how many owners have contributed? I don't know that number off the top of my head, but it's a sizable number. It's I don't know. I don't want to estimate, but it's quite a few. It's not two or three.
And I should mention that we are very protective of the privacy of ownership. We do not plan to name anybody in this catalog at all. We know who owns what, but that's not what the catalog's for. The catalog is a reference book. When, size, how, whatever.
On that same note, I've got the same question a couple times. Do you have plans on publishing a book?
Oh, we're talking about a catalog now, but I would say that about a half of the people that I've shown that we have some printed versions of the catalog that we use as sort of working documents. And I've shown those to people, and about half of them say, "Tom, this is a book." there's a book. And it might be, it's a very expensive proposition. Right now, we're concentrating on getting a catalog at some point into print form. And it may morph into a book before, during, and after. We don't know. Certainly, there's material there to have just knock your socks off book.
Yeah, one option, could be publish the catalog in a certain way, either online or in hard copy. The constraint there is the market for a catalog is not of this type. We do not estimate to be, very large. The real interest would probably be in what you might call a masterworks book, which would be a coffee table type book that contained, the best images of the best paintings, that would display, the artist's, masterworks. That, of course, like Tom said, would be an expensive endeavor too. And that's why this year is so important, to continue to research and find additional paintings, but we are also looking constantly at what is the quality of the images that we have. For example, we're working with a fine art photographer out here in Seattle who's doing test digital work on 4x4 inch transparencies that Tom found in the studio earlier this year. And so we're trying to see what kind of quality we can get out of a 50 or 60-year-old transparency using, ultra modern digital high-speed scanning technology. So there's, Tom talked about the conundrums. Every time we think we figure something out, there's one more thing that we have to research. But it's all part of the process. And, these projects typically take many years. So, we just have to be patient and continue to push forward.
This is interesting. My iPhone just ding-a-linged, and a gentleman from the Stowe area has a photo of a picture that he's of someone skiing the Bruce Trail and wondering whether it might be my father's. I'll have to take a look at it. I can't do it right now, but that's exactly what we hoped would happen by doing this webinar.
That email is probably the
Thank
same
you, everybody.
one I just received. If it's not, I'll forward it to you. Tom, did your dad have a favorite medium?
No. He loved both oils and watercolors, and he loved to etch. But he would go back and forth. I think, well, no, I can't say he had a favorite one at all. He just loved to paint, and he would get into stretches where he would be doing a bunch of watercolors, maybe 3 or 4 during the summer months, and they'd be all watercolors, and then he might do a hunting oil, and then, of course, the portrait. He always did a portrait a year, and that was the way he relaxed. He loved to paint a portrait, and there are many portraits around the town of Weston that he painted. Some gratis, because he was just looking for a good subject so that he could paint and have one for the Southern Vermont Art Center annual show.
Could you expand on what it was like to stay at ranch camp, sleeping, eating, and accommodations?
Oh boy, it was, well, the food was spectacular. Because the same cooks that were cooking for the lumbermen in the summer were there in the winter, I believe. But you ate; it was wonderful. It was rough. There was no insulation in anything. Each of the cabins were heated by oil drum stoves. That's one oil drum on top of another oil drum. The lower oil drum is the firebox, and then the hot air goes up through the second oil drum, which radiates heat, and then it goes up through a chimney and out through the roof. That was the heating in the bunkhouses. It was a glorified outhouse. I remember, I mean, the shower room was primitive, and I was a young guy, and I can remember being somewhat embarrassed going into this lumberjack's shower with big shower heads splashing water. Um, and and it was neat. The dogs were neat. You weren't allowed to play with the dogs. At least I wasn't. They were all business, and it was primitive. I mean, you I didn't know anything different because I'd never stayed at a ski lodge, and but I think Dad stayed there a total of 3 times, and then they closed it, and we stayed at is it the State Dorm, which was in the parking lot at the bottom of Mansfield, and that was a whole different gig, and I didn't like it very much. Way too modern.
Did your dad interact at all with the 10th Mountain Division alumni?
Um, yes, absolutely. One of his very best friends was Joe Jones, um, and Joe and Ann Jones, who he skied with a great deal, went to the Bugaboos with them. And oh Lord, Pete Seibert out in Vail, who he got to be pretty good friends with. I'm sure that my nephews, the Voorhees boys, would might have an answer to that. But yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is, when we first moved up here, I mean, there were a lot of 10th Mountain guys. I mean, you didn't pay much attention to it, the fact. But they became scarcer and scarcer. And but certainly Joe and Ann Jones were the very dear friends, and he painted portraits of all of the kids in the family, and they have a couple of wonderful wonderful oils of Vermont scapes, I would say.
Anybody in your family inherit your dad's artistry?
Well, how could we? No, my sister was very artistic. I painted as a kid. I have some art, some skills, but yeah, large my part of my career, I was art directing books and calendars and photographers, and then I wound up my career basically managing printing for Disney and Ringling Brothers, and there I was basically a color specialist. So in one way or another, color has been a part of my life.
All right. And then someone just has a question, if this presentation will be available to view later, and the answer is yes, it is being recorded. We will put it on the museum's YouTube channel later next week. I say we make every effort to do that, and it will happen unless something technologically goes wrong. But right now, all is good. So we're looking good. So we should have that on our YouTube channel later next week. And we certainly encourage you to share that with anybody that might be interested. These events, these presentations, this is our mission work as a nonprofit. But it also, this specific presentation could potentially help Curt and Tom find missing artwork, which would be amazing. And if it happens, I want to hear about it. No other questions, really, just some comments that it was really great to hear old stories about ski areas that people love and that the paintings are beautiful. So with that, do either of you two have any closing remarks you'd like to say?
Just thank you, everybody, for watching, and thanks, Curt, for helping lead me by the hand through Zoom meetings one after the other. And it's a fun project.
Yeah,
Thanks everybody for coming.
yeah, I mean, I just like to thank Tom for being such a fun and reliable partner in this effort. It's a ton of work. We enjoy the discoveries, and we appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. And Abby, thanks again to you and the museum for for hosting the event. We really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, we're happy to.
I have to say, that is, I don't know what's been said before, that is Mount Rainier behind Curt. Okay. I don't know whether that's been mentioned. That's right. From that photo is taken from Crystal Mountain looking at Rainier. So I don't I didn't have Stratton behind me.
All
Thank you.
right. Well, thank you both, Curt and Tom, so much. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. I hope that you're all inspired by Ettinger's work and Tom and Curt's ongoing project. And what's on the screen right now, the two email addresses, if you have additional questions or information that may help them in this endeavor, please email them. Um, and then we do have an Ettinger print available for purchase in our online shop. And the print we have, which you saw today, is March Day Stratton. So if you are interested in bringing some of his art into your home, as a bonus for tuning in tonight, I did create a 15% discount code that's good through November 20th, which is next Wednesday. And that discount code works on the entire shop if you want to do some additional holiday shopping while you're at it. You just have to use promo code RedBench15 at checkout. And if you're local and you don't want to pay shipping, you can also add promo code pickup, and I will set it aside for you to come and pick it up. And so that is available until next Wednesday. And then also a reminder not to forget to make your donations for your chance to win a pair of Darn Tough socks. And at the museum currently, we are very busy installing the next exhibit, which is Searching for Vermont's Lost Ski Areas Part 2. And we will reopen. We've been closed for a period of time trying to get this done. We'll reopen Friday, November 29th for anyone who wants to check out our permanent exhibits or do some holiday shopping in what will be a newly stocked gift shop. And then we invite you all to join us at the exhibit opening party on Friday, December 6th, between 5 and 8. And that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you again so much for tuning in. Appreciate it as always. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Abby.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.